Hello again. So today we're going to talk about substance abuse, and when I say substance abuse, most people may associate that with the kind of things like drug use, glue sniffing, that kind of thing. But we're going to kind of widen it into kind of more general substance abuse, the kind of things we do every day, really, things we eat, things we drink, certain habits like smoking. Just wanted to give you our perspective on this and also our experiences. Two people who probably also taken or eaten things in our diet that we might actually look back at now and think, I can't believe I ever used to do that. So, Annette, what about yourself? Have you actually taken things that you kind of have changed your mind on now?
Uh, yes, changed my mind to some degree, and some things have changed by themselves, which is interesting. So I've got three. We've compiled a list here of some of the typical things that we end up with cravings to, collectively speaking, and I've got coffee on the list, chocolate, and alcohol. Which one shall I go for first?
That's completely up to you. But the one that particularly interests me is the things you've talked about in the past related to chocolate.
Well, chocolate. Okay, this is an amazing one. I honestly believed I would be um, what my mother has termed a chocolate face for the whole of my life, and I was fairly happy that that would be the case because I've never considered chocolate to be a dangerous food, and I still don't. Let me just say that, and I will still occasionally eat it. However, I have been aware, especially recently, I've alluded to having chronic fatigue, and I've been aware of the fact that it is a stimulant, and I seem not to fare very well with stimulants. And remarkably, eating a healthier diet, one that supports me and one that I've transformed to enjoy. My palate's changed. I'm guessing my gut flora's changed. We may get onto that a little bit in a moment. And it's just one of those things I've gradually left behind, and I've not stopped eating it. I've not given it up. I've not gone through that horrible process of, oh my god, I really shouldn't eat this, and I just had a load yesterday, and all of that kind of thing. It's just one of those things I'm just not really eating anymore, and have no craving for. So every now and then, but really every now and then, I'm talking weeks apart, it might be nice to have a little bit, and that's it. That's as much as I seem to want. So that's the
Mm.
chocolate story, and that's the most recent one. As I say, it was never an attempt of mine to give it up, just to cut it down maybe, and certainly to eat raw chocolate because for some reason the standard type doesn't. I already know that doesn't suit me. Um, the coffee one was interesting. I had no idea. I would go as far as to term this an addiction in my case, the coffee one.
Mm.
Um, I used to have a cup of coffee every morning, just the one. I didn't have loads of coffee, and I remember being at somebody's house in Germany and having really nice coffee, I have to say, and yet having the most awful headaches day after day for about 3 days. And then I saw her take it out of the cupboard one day and it was decaffeinated coffee. And I thought, I think there may be a link there. And on one of those days, it got so bad, I remember leaving what I was attending so that I could go to the main station, which would be open on that day, to get some coffee. And sure enough, the headache disappeared. And I didn't take the hint. I kept drinking coffee in order not to have the headache and because I was enjoying it. Eventually, I thought that this probably is not something that's suitable for me, bearing in mind how that affected me. And I had to go through the whole process again, and I had about a week of intense headache coming off this one small cup of coffee. It didn't work for me to reduce it to, it was really small, it was about half a cup of coffee. It didn't work for me to reduce it to that. I had to cut it out completely. Uh, that's one of those things that seems to work for some people and not for others. It doesn't work for me. That's gone now, and I no longer have that craving either. The alcohol one, I don't feel a little bit miffed by this one in some ways because I feel like I fell into the trap of alcohol. No, not alcohol in particular, but the one I was having was usually red wine. Is something is what the Mediterraneans have. It keeps their heart healthy, and I almost felt I should have it, and I liked it. And that then also got to the point I had it a little glass every evening, and the problem with that was not the amount. The amount was never a problem. I didn't overdrink by that stage. I'd long gone past binge drinking, which did happen occasionally when I was a student. Um, However, the small amount had to be there. That was the problem. I had to have it. And if there was a parents' evening while I was a teacher and I had to get back in the car and drive, and I thought I shouldn't have the wine, I used to feel irritable about it. It annoyed me that I couldn't have my wine, and I don't have that anymore. And there's a lot of freedom when you're able to let go of things, whatever the process is for letting go. And that was another thing. I just felt that it's time for me to stop doing this. It actually isn't that healthy. In fact, we've been reading recently about some of the impacts of alcohol on certain cancers, and breast cancer is one in particular. And I just don't need it. It's something I don't need in my life at all. And I much prefer not having it. Of course, socially, it's awkward in Britain because we are quite fixated on alcohol, really, the British nationality, unfortunately. But I've even got past that now. It's up to me what I put in my body, and I'm much happier with what I'm eating now. And it's a freedom. Mm. So they're my three.
Yeah.
What are your three?
Well, just before I go on to mine, I was just going to say as well that as we're approaching this, we're not saying to anyone that we're not moralizing about it and saying you should never eat or drink these things. This is really personal. It's our findings, and it's kind of how we've evolved. So alcohol was very much something that I was accustomed to having for quite a lot of years throughout my adult life, and from my student days through to probably about, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, I regularly drank. There was very rarely a day where I didn't have alcohol, and it most often it would be that kind of glass or two of red wine when I got back from work, and it was something, and probably a lot of people can identify with this. It's that having a stressful day, and you're looking forward during your day to getting home and having that glass of wine and relaxing, and it becomes something that we do become dependent on it in a sense. And when I got together with Annette, it was something that we continued doing as well, and then eventually Annette kind of, her, as she's just described, she no longer drank alcohol, and for me it was kind of, it then also began to just kind of wind down, and to the point where now really I don't drink regular, very occasionally, and usually when I'm out, if we go to a cafe or a restaurant, I'll maybe order a bottle of continental beer, organic,
yeah,
and that's it. But that's very occasionally, and I really enjoy it when I have it as well. It's kind of like it's just like it's kind of just something that because I don't have it very often, I really luxuriate in it.
You're able to stop at one now as well, which I don't
yes,
think you used to do.
Yeah. I mean, I used to drink more. Going back to the red wine, Annette mentioned about the Mediterranean thing, that, oh yes, it's healthy, and it's quite interesting this, because I think we do tend to kid ourselves that red wine is healthy for the heart, and it's based on research that's been done into certain chemicals, if you like, within the grape, and particularly the red grape, the resveratrol, which is an antioxidant and a plant chemical. And it has been shown to be very beneficial for our health. But it doesn't mean to say that we've got to actually imbue it with alcohol for that to be healthful. Eating red grapes, and particularly the skin of red grapes, is where that is. Probably any benefits are undone by the alcohol in the end. It might be beneficial for the heart, but it certainly, as Annette's mentioned, the alcohol has been implicated in potentially causing certain cancers. So I wouldn't get too kind of hung up on, or not carried away with red wine being healthy. The other thing for me really is, I would say, smoking. A lot of people are surprised. A lot of people that know me more recently are surprised to know that, to find out that I used to smoke. And I smoked again most of my adult life up to about 15 years ago. And it's kind of more or less when I turned 40, and do the maths there. And I thought that
it's wrong then.
I thought that this is not really something I want to be doing anymore because of the risks, and it's time I gave up. And I quite surprised myself that I actually decided one day to give up, and from smoking probably 15 to 20 cigarettes a day, I stopped overnight. And I thought, how am I going to enjoy life anymore? That link that you have, going out for a drink to a pub, or um, the kinds of times you're used to having a cigarette and thinking, how am I going to enjoy that moment, that experience anymore if I can't have a cigarette? And Yeah, initially it was a little bit tricky, but you just kind of you focus on something else, and it dissipated. So for me, I personally found it more easy than I had imagined, and I'm really really happy now that I did give up 15 years ago.
Especially now, I would think.
Yeah, so that's another link with the situation today with COVID-19. There is obviously there's quite a strong link with the respiratory system, and obviously smoking is going to be harmful to our respiratory system and to our lungs, and therefore we don't really want to be compounding the risk factors if we can help it. So perhaps now is the best time to give up if you are still partial to a cigarette or two or more. So that's kind of it. No, really, in terms of cheese. Oh, sorry, yes, there is. Yes, cheese, of course, I've forgotten. So the other one, and a lot of people might be able to identify with this one as well, is cheese. So we don't eat dairy now at all. So therefore, no cheese, no butter, no milk, and the most difficult of those for me to give up was cheese, because I guess I was addicted to it. That taste, that texture in the mouth, and it was something I would generally have on an evening after a meal, day in, day out. And it's not only because of the high fat, saturated fat content I'm happy I gave it up, but it's also because there are other things in the cheese which certain substances which have been found to be potentially harmful
and addictive.
Addictive. Yeah. So Annette, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, just mention really that there is a substance that we weren't aware of until relatively recently called casomorphine, which I guess acts as it sounds and does keep you craving it and wanting more. And certainly I've come across lots of people who feel they could give up dairy, but not the cheese. The cheese is the one that always calls them back. And there are ways around the cheese thing. There are two options really, and we've tried both ultimately without intending to. One is to actually create nut versions or seed versions of the cheese, and it's actually the fermentation that gives it the taste that is still somewhat satisfying, I would say. You're not going to have the casomorphine because you've not got the casein in it, the casein rather. However, that's a good thing because the casein, the protein, in some people has been shown to cause problems, again relating to cancers and so on, which we can probably do without. But the fermentation of any nut cheese does still give you that satisfaction. I think that's what we've found. We don't have those anymore either now. Not that we wouldn't occasionally. We have done. In fact, we had the lovely one in Berlin. I remember the spreadable one, gorgeous. But really, again, I think it's that whole thing of eating a whole food, plant-based diet, which we now have progressed to, and it has been a progression. We haven't done it overnight. It just leaves you not wanting a lot of these things because you actually want things that feed your body and that suit it. And I think part of the reason for that is, well, there are two fairly obvious ones, and one is, in fact, there are three, and you can talk about a third. The first one is your palate changes. And that's the difficulty initially, because if you're not consuming those tastes that you're used to, it feels boring, it feels dull. Especially you talked earlier about, not on this video, but on something else, about eating quite a lot of salt. That if that seems to be missing, then everything's bland because you're so used to salt. So that's one. Your palate changes and things become. You taste like the salt in the celery, for example. Really taste that, and fruits become sweeter, and so things that are natural have more taste to you over time, and quite quickly, really. That develops fairly quickly, I personally. But the other one, and there needs to be more research into this, and hopefully there will be, but it seems that our gut flora they're the ones actually dictating sometimes what it is that we eat. Because if there is a lot of them that like a certain type of food, and this applies actually across the board to a lot of junk food, they will clamour for it. They will find ways of making you go out and get more of it. So you're kind of held prisoner a little bit to your gut flora if you've got the wrong little critters down there. You need to shift the balance a little bit, and the more fruits and vegetables you can eat, the more they will expand the good guys, if you like to put it simply, and they will then clamour more for that. And you pointed out earlier to me that when I initially had the chronic fatigue, I had a really strong craving for fruit in particular, vegetables too, especially leafy greens, but fruit, I just seemed to want it so much. And that was listening to my body in that case rather than a craving. There is a difference. And it's really good to try and get that balance and understand which one's a craving, which one is you listening to your body to get better or to stay well. But the other thing is you talked a little bit about the brain, didn't you? The sort of pathways in the brain. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. So why do we do these things? Why do we have these urges to eat something or drink something? And it's linked with pleasure. So it's linked with the response of the brain. It's the brain's reward system. So I know there's a lot of there are hormones involved, and dopamine is one of them. So when we have something, we get that instant relief, but it's quite short term, and then we actually get an urge to do it again because we need to keep feeding that reward system. So it's quite interesting to step back and actually look at yourself doing this. I think if you become more aware of it, that's one of the keys to actually then trying to deal with it, and maybe see if you can remove that need more consciously, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess that's it, really.
It is pretty much. There's just one thing to add, and that is that there's probably one glaringly obvious omission, and that's because we've been really lucky not having a major issue with this ever, really, and that's sugar. Neither of us had strong sugar addictions, really, but the same applies to everything that we've said. If that's the thing that you seem not to be able to let go of very easily, then some of this will apply. Certainly the gut flora, they love that. They will thrive on a lot of sugar, but they're not the ones that are going to be particularly helpful to you. And remember that the microbiome we now know is a big part of our immune system as well. So it is really important. And making that shift in whatever pace you can do it, it makes good sense. We've certainly found that there's a freedom to not being drawn to have these things. I think that's what it is.
I think also it's worth saying that if any of what we're saying resonates with you, and you might be wanting to make changes, but maybe you've held back because there is sometimes pressure. There's pressure from friends, pressure from society, from your peers, to actually go along with things, and otherwise you're considered to be boring. Or how often do we hear?
I'm good apparently.
How often do we hear? Oh, go on, enjoy yourself, let your hair down.
You only live once.
And
but we'd like to live.
We get so infuriated by that because it's if you only live once, you might as well extend your years as long as possible. And I think
and live them really healthily and full of energy and so on. If you can, you do your best, don't you?
And it isn't boring. It's actually I think there's a lot of courage in it as well.
Yeah, that's true.
To step away from the mainstream, and I think sometimes it can be maybe a lonely journey, but if it's for yourself, then what better reason to do it?
And there'll always be somebody else who's doing it somewhere too. You just got to find them.
And one last thing I wanted to mention as well. A lot of people use the excuse of not giving up smoking because they say it'll make me put on weight, which is quite a valid excuse, I suppose, because I think I did actually put on weight for a little bit of the time. I think I was probably around 17 stone when I actually gave up smoking. I weighed myself this morning and I was 10 stone 12. So obviously there isn't a long-term effect on your weight. Anyway, I guess that's it.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.